Okay, we now come to the session of Professor Rudolf Ahlswede's mathematical work in Bielefeld and also before. So we decided to have two main lectures by his former assistants Gunter Dück and Ingo Althöfer, and some short contributions, because he had so many activities, so many co-authors, so many areas of research, so many friends, that another one or two lectures would not cover everything. We shall start with his early work in the 70s, and we try to figure out who among the participants knew him for the longest time. And besides Professor Jacobs and and the Göttingen crew, it should be Edward van der Meulen. And he's a long-time companion since 1970, and he will speak on the early work on information theory from 1970 to 1974.
First of all, I'd like to express my condolences to the family, Beatrix and Alexander, whom I met first in 1976 during my first visit to Bielefeld. And I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about the early years of Rudi Ahlswede's work in information theory. I met Rudi first at a meeting in Waterloo, Kitchener-Waterloo, on information measures. He was there together with Jack Wolfowitz. Neither of them gave a talk, but they listened with great interest to my presentation on the radio channel, and I very much enjoyed the interaction with both of them after my talk and during the remaining part of the meeting. Here are a collection of Rudi's papers in the previous period. There are two papers in which he already refers to Shannon's two-way communication channel, showing his early interest in that paper and also in multi-user communication. My own background was that I did my PhD at Berkeley in information theory. I moved then on to the University of Rochester. I met Kemperman there, and Rudi had good contacts with Kemperman, sent his reprints and preprints to him, and Kemperman would pass those on to me. I remember, for example, him sending a reprint, and he had written on it, "Family size is now 2 + 1. I don't know exactly what year that was, but Sasha can probably reconstruct the year that was written. The Tsakatsour Symposium in 1971 was very important. In spring 1971, those papers were due. And I remember that Rudi Ahlswede had a manuscript fully ready in June 1971. And in that manuscript, which is 52 pages, he announced, not only announced, he gives the full proof for the situation of the, he had established the capacity region of the multiple access channel. And he presented those results in Tsakatsour at a meeting which was very well attended, and there is no doubt about that he had those results. He was the earliest one to establish those. Here is a form, the first part of some correspondence from Tsakatsour, showing that meeting took place still in the old days, 1971, organized by the Armenian SSSR Academy of Sciences. It was a very interesting meeting, and also my first trip to the former Soviet Union. In that paper, he claims, he says, clearly we establish the capacity regions of the following two channels. channel with 2 and one with 3 senders and 1 receiver, and he announces results also for the situation of a channel with 2 senders and 2 receivers. And this is his well-known characterization, established in 1971, known to everyone in the field. The actual proof is very short. He only writes, E1 is an error term which occurs by applying the random encoding method to Shannon's two-way channels. That's all there is, and then he gives the expression. And for people familiar with Shannon's two-way channel paper, it's enough of a statement, and it was clear. Of course, one had to think about what he was writing there, but it was the proof. Unfortunately, it was a controversy which has haunted Rudy for a long time in his career, and that was about Liao. Half a year later, a certain person, Liao, presented the same result at a meeting in California. He gave no credit to Rudy about this, neither did he give any proof. Also in a paper by Sleppy and Wolf, which appeared a year later, the same result was of the same person was quoted. It was said both Ahlswede and Liao established that region, but nobody has ever seen, at least I haven't, and neither did Rudy, say proof of that result. This is then the expression by Sleppy and Wolf attributed to both Rudy and Liao. Rudy came back to this in his follow-up paper in the Annals of Probability. He had submitted that in the fall of 1972. This was then the second representation and characterization, which is more symmetric than the first one, also well known to everyone in the field. In the second line, or second paragraph here, I write that he sent me a reprint, and at the bottom he wrote something added in print on insistence of referee after I mentioned that work had been extended. So here's a copy of that reprint to Edward and then RA. And at the bottom he writes, added in print, a reference to Sleppy and Wolf, so clearly indicating that he was not very happy, that he was forced to to add that reference. He simply had the priority on that result. I had a follow-up, which is, I think, was kind of cute. He suggested as a problem to find an easier converse, and so I established what I think was an easier converse in paper and information and control. And so the title was On a Problem by Ahlswede regarding the capacity region of certain multi-way channels, not particularly deep, but in any case, it established also a good rapport between Rudy and me on these matters. I also used Rudy's technique in deriving a rate region for the broadcast channel. Unfortunately, this has never been further used because Cover proved similar or same result with another technique of joint typicality, which is now in use for proving multi-user rate regions. And I never talked with Rudy about it, but in any case, I believe it was a very good method which he had put forward. I wrote some survey articles, and Rudy kept writing to me all the time about commenting about the historical priority of his results for the multiple access channel as compared to those of Liao. He came back to that in his Coloring Hypergraphs 1 paper. He gave a rather philosophical treatment of the history. On the one hand, first showing the identity and commenting on the asymmetric, and then later on the symmetric version. And he writes also there clearly, since our 3 case was so complicated, we are curious about Liao's proof, in which until now has not appeared in print. And then with a nice sentence, once one frees his mind from thinking in terms of equality and passes on to inequalities, then for X and Y independent, that reasons it. Other papers by Rudy in that area are listed here. I was particularly familiar with the last one on two-way channels and a problem by Zarankiewicz. The paper on feedback, the constructive proof of the coding theorem, he often told me that it was an important paper and he thought it should be used more often, the technique of it. And the one on the arbitrary invariant channel has had great impact later, and I think Nen Kai will probably also refer to it. My I had many visits to Bielefeld and Oberwolfach, thanks to Rudy. I mentioned already a week visit in 1976. Er was Gutachter für das Sonderforschungsbereich discrete Strukturen in der Mathematik. I don't know exactly what year, but it must have been around 1987. Of course, there was the birthday celebration, several visits to the ZIF, and several Oberwolfach meetings I attended, and which were very fruitful. And Rudy was also always the main person, the main organizer, who brought people together. And many persons in Europe and also have benefited from those meetings. Our further encounters, several workshops. We invited him 3 times to Belgium, to Leuven, for the Gelfand workshop. And 3 students of mine had quite a bit of influence on Bielefeld for their research and research topics. One on code generated by permutations, another one on identification problem, and a third one on creating order in sequence spaces. I'm very grateful to Rudy and about the possible contacts we had, in which Gunter Duke also played an important role. Here's a picture taken at the Leuven workshop in 1988, and you'll recognize Rudy as the second person from the right. Other persons here in the audience on this photo are Prakash Narayan, Frans Willems. Here's another version of that picture with me having the privilege to stand next to Rudy, now second person from the right. My last contact was Rudy regarding some work he did the past in 2008 and 2010. He presented a new result at the celebration of Imre Csiszár's 70th birthday. And a year ago, June 29, he sent me the paper, Every Channel with Time Structure as a Capacity Sequence. And he added the message, this paper I promise to you at Csiszár's birthday celebration. Actually, the additivity I did a few weeks later. I consider it to be a fundamental result. This work will be presented at the workshop in Dublin, August, September 2010. Best regards, Rudy. This was my last contact with Rudy. I replied, of course, to his email I was grateful to have known Rudy, have benefited much from his ideas, from the contact, and I thank you for your interest. Chairman, yeah.